what's happened last week with ARPA, the final rule came out, okay? If you'll remember, you got all your money back in June or so, or you got half of your money, and there was an interim final rule that was adopted by the Department of Treasury, okay? And I'm sure, I know Parker and I have spoken about it, and you probably heard folks from Mississippi State, and you probably heard Tom Chain and Pat Dindy talk about it. Well, they finally came out with the final rule Thursday, and there is a tremendous change for all of you in that final rule. How many of you got less than $10 million? Oh, whoa. Yeah. More? How many got more? Oh, look at that. Congratulations. No, I really think Jackson, Hattiesburg, Gulfport, there's only about 5 or 6 cities that got more than $10 million. So, given the knowledge that it's hot in here, and I'm the only thing, and Parker's the only thing between you and the bar, our presentation got briefer because of this new rule. And if you look up there, there are 4 categories that you can spend this money on, okay? You can use it to respond to COVID and its negative economic impacts. You can use it to the extent you have revenue loss because of COVID. You can use it for premium pay, or you can use it for water, sewer, or broadband. And that's what we've been telling y'all for the last 6 months or so. And that's still the case, okay? But let's look at revenue loss, and I'm going to try to get it, guys. I didn't have time to put Tom waited till the last minute to get COVID. If he had gotten it a couple of days ago, we'd have been in better shape. But look, revenues loss for, unless you got more than $10 million, is what you all need to focus on, okay? Because they've changed it. And now, you know, the rule says you can use your ARPA money for the provision of governmental services to the extent you have a revenue loss due to COVID, okay? Now, originally, there was a formula. Don't y'all all remember the formula? Have y'all looked at it? I'm sure the clerks have. Maybe the mayors haven't. Certainly the aldermen haven't, in all due respect. But the clerks know what I'm talking about. There's a formula that you had to look at, okay? Now, with this final rule, they give you 2 options when you're looking at your revenue loss. They give you a standard allowance of up to $10 million, okay? Or you can actually calculate your revenue loss with the formula they've done. There's no reason why y'all shouldn't take the $10 million standard deduction or standard allowance, okay? Y'all got that? Y'all shake your heads. Cause this is why. Somebody in the hall a while ago was talking to somebody I know and said, I hear we're getting $10 million. You're not getting $10 million. It's kind of like, this is a tax deal. You can claim up to the total amount that you've got, but not more than $10 million as a revenue loss. Now, once you choose, you can't choose, but once you choose either the standard allowance or the revenue loss calculation, that's what you're stuck with. But why? There's no reason for y'all not to choose the $10 million revenue loss calculation, right? Okay, now, y'all, and look, I'm going through this revenue loss, and then Parker's going to get up here and talk about some of the practical stuff as far as getting, your resolutions. You still have to comply with uniform guidance, things like that. He's going to talk about that and your reporting. Your reporting, unless you're one of those entitlement units, all of your reports aren't due until April, so you still got some time. Now, let's talk about, so you take the $10 million allowance, okay? What can you spend the money on? I can't even see it. You can spend the money, and these are examples in the rule itself. You spend the money for schools and hospitals, I've got it written. Roads, building, and infrastructure, and other general infrastructure, health services, government administration, staff, and administrative facilities, environmental remediation, your police, your fire, and other public safety type services. And then here's another important change that they've made to this. You can use the money, as long as you take that standard allowance, as your non-federal match in grants. That's sort of a big deal, I would think, to a lot of y'all. So you can leverage this money more. Now, if you notice, here's what you've got. In general, this is not an exhaustive list, and the new rule says this isn't an exhaustive list, but these are examples of what you can use it for. So if you're in that, you're good. So government services are typically really what you'd normally be doing, okay? However, like the rule goes in, and you got to keep this in mind. You're just not worried about federal law or what the feds say. You still have to comply with state law. Let me say that. You still have to comply with state law. For instance, the rule says you can use the money you get from the feds for schools and hospitals. I think a couple of you may be involved with a hospital, but how many of you want to build a new school or can? Well, I know you do want to, but the cities can't just go out and build a school, okay? That's for the school district to do. You've got to jump through the state hoops to do some things. On the other hand, how many of y'all, a lot of folks, okay, a lot of folks are trying to use this money for staffing, to give hazard pay, to hire new people. One thing to remember, so you cannot use this money. Under state law, you can't use this money for a PERS, what's the word? To give it to PERS. You can't use this money to the extent, even though the rule says that you can pay salaries and benefits. Well, you can't do that under Mississippi law, okay? The other thing is, that one of the categories is to use it for premium pay. You can use, in general, you use the money for premium pay. And so the question we've gotten the question, well, if I take the $10 million allowance, can I use it for hazard pay or premium pay and just do it, don't worry about the $13, they have a $13 limitation or a $25,000 limitation for hazard pay under the ARPA rules. I think you still have to comply with that if you do take that standard allowance. And I hope that made sense when I said it. But there's still, we still have to review this. It's brand new. Or there's still some things we need to review. But I think when y'all are looking at paying people, using this money to pay people, hazard pay, you need to stick with the $13 limitation per hour. You can't exceed $13 per hour limitation or $25,000. The other thing is on premium pay, you've got to make sure you pay people, well, in general, you can't pay people for past work, okay? Under the state law, it's all prospective going forward. So last time, we were talking at the city clerks, and I got this question, and this is related, but it's a tad bit different. So incentives to get people vaccinated, okay? I think one county has given an incentive to get people vaccinated. Well, if you go read the rules, FAQs, that is an eligible expense. You can use the money to get incentives. But under state law, and what was happening, let me back up, what was happening, that the county was giving here's you a $100 incentive to go get vaccinated. And the county was getting people coming in and with vaccination cards that said they got vaccinated last year, right? That dog won't hunt under state law. Regardless, of whether the feds say you can do it. All the incentives are prospective, okay, from today's date forward, okay? The other thing, so keep that in mind. I'm trying to think, there was another question. Also, you got to have the money obligated by December 31st in 2024. Obligated means you have to have a contract on it, okay? Any questions about that? I think y'all can all spend the money. I don't think there's going to be a problem with that. But I'm going to let Parker talk, but the main thing that, and I think the auditor's office really wanted to hammer on y'all using, especially in the context of giving people premium pay, make sure you comply with state law in addition to the federal law, because that's what's going to get a lot of you. And I know Tom Chain and I talked last week when this came out, and Parker will talk about it a little bit. The federal procurement is a little bit different than the state procurement, and you have to make sure you comply with both of them. If state law doesn't have a procurement procedure, you still have to have a federal. There still may be a federal requirement. So there's still some issues that you need to be aware of, and you just make sure you're talking to your attorneys about this, okay? Now, look, I tell you one thing, too, when the auditor comes to audit you, and I think the Department of Treasury or whomever it is up there in Washington got like $175 million to audit all of us. When they come, and they're going to come at some point, it's better to say, here's all our documents to justify spending the money. Don't go tell them, well, Troy said I could do it. Don't do that. Don't. That will get you nowhere, and I didn't get paid to do it. Yes, sir.
Can you use that money in combination with like bond money to finish our water?
So I am so glad you brought that up. So here's what you can't do. Okay, let me tell you what you can't do with the money, and that's a big. I forgot that. Golly, you can't use the money for debt service. Okay, you can't use the money to settle judgments. Okay, and you can't use it for retirement or rainy day funds. Now you can't do that. Now, so that's not really what you asked. You asked, can you use this money and combine it with a water and sewer project? Yeah, you can do that.
And that's a bond money that the legislature.
Right. So what y'all look? Here's the deal, and this is what I'm kind of curious. Whatever comes down from the legislature, okay, you can use that money probably to match with. I say from the legislature, from their ARPA money, okay. But if y'all have a bill up there asking for just an appropriation for state bond money, yeah, you can use that money to match it.
We already got the bond money.
Mm-hmm.
Prices went up, so we had to hold up on the project.
Now,
and I need more money to go with it to finish my project.
right.
If it's an eligible project.
If it's an eligible project.
But
Okay.
if you declare it a government, I mean, the $10 million threshold is a government service, then that's clearly
A government service.
project.
Now, here's the one. You've got to make sure the expenditure occurs after March 3rd, okay? Just make sure that's, and because your project, I mean, if it's way back there, it may not comply, but the expenditure you've incurred has to happen after March 3rd to use the ARPA money.
Of 2021.
Of 21. Golly, it's
When the
22.
act
Yes, I'm
was
sorry.
passed.
Of 2021. Thanks. See, she helped. Another question? Yes, sir. Back there. Well, that's because I didn't change it. And that's, see, golly, that's changed from the old rule. I actually meant to put that up there because I knew you would ask. And see, it's changed that fast. Now you can use the money for a federal match. Let me be clear. Now you can use it for your non-federal match, okay? Any other questions?
That's just the government, yeah.
Well.
Just the revenue loss.
Okay, you talk. Okay, now Parker's going to kind of talk about the process.
All right, so Troy kind of went through, a general overview, and I know he's talked several times before about the entire ARPA process and the procedures and what's eligible, primarily the eligible categories. And obviously, the biggest change, as he's mentioned, is this change in the revenue loss, right, where you can pick either the really hard formula to figure out, what your revenue loss is, or you can take the standard allowance up to 10 million, right? The one thing I want to reiterate, the point that Treasury, they introduced this interim rule back in July, right, when the money came down and they issued some guidance. And they spent the past 6 months or however long getting comment and feedback from counties, cities, state governments, tribes all across the country on how to better improve the program. And one of the main things they did as a result of that was to introduce this additional category for revenue loss to make it easier for people like you, smaller counties, smaller cities, localities around the country. Obviously, Mississippi is a predominantly rural state, so we have a lot of smaller municipalities. And so this is designed for you to take advantage of it, right? So how do you do that? What's some practical, just some tips that you should think about? And Troy already mentioned a couple. You got half your money already, right? You're going to get the other half May, June, July. So I don't know the exact date, but somewhere in that time frame, probably closer to July or maybe June. Obviously, put your money in a separate account if you haven't already, designated as ARPA funds, whatever you want to call it. So it's clear that it's in a separate account because it's federal monies. But there are certain, this has not changed, right? So while Treasury is making it easier for you to spend the money if you claim up to 10 million revenue loss presumption, you still are still stuck with what's called the Uniform Grant Guidance under federal law. And that it relates to procurement. It relates to how you monitor the money to make sure it was spent properly. There's reporting requirements. And I'm not going to get into the details of all that. I just want to mention a couple of those. And you still, as I mentioned, you still have to report. And we'll talk about a report for most of y'all that's due at the end of April. And so when you get this money, you put it in your account. You need to make sure that you adopt. The biggest thing, as Troy mentioned, is that 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years from now, when OIG, Office of Inspector General with Treasury, comes knocking on the door to audit your accounts for use of your ARPA monies, you want to be able to say, oh, wait a minute, here's all of our ARPA stuff, right? Here's all of our resolutions. Here are our board minutes from where we got the money. Here's what we made the declarations, what we're going to do with the money, and here's how we spent it. If you don't have a record of that, it makes it a lot harder on whoever your current administration is years down the road. That should make sense. So document. I can't say that enough. I mean, that's many of y'all are really good at doing that already in many of your things, especially when you're spending money. But again, document. So on the front end, you need to get with your board attorney for your particular city and make sure that you adopt policies that set forth that you're going to follow the proper procurement, not only under state law, because you always got to do that, right? But federal law as well. You got to comply with both, and they are not apples to apples. There's a little bit difference on that. So I'm going to mention one particularly to you. Under federal law, there's no exemption for procuring services, right? Under state law, you don't have to go procure or do procurement for a service, right? I mean, you can, but you don't have to, right? That's exempt from the procurement requirements. But there is no such exemption under under federal law. So there are a bunch of consultants out there in this industry for ARPA consulting, okay? And many of you may have hired one, and that's great. Many of you may not have been approached, but you will be approached. What you need to know is if you're going to pay a consultant to help you administer your ARPA funds, or pay your accountant or pay your board attorney to help administer ARPA funds, and use ARPA funds to pay it, because you can for administration, you got to make sure you follow the proper procurement requirements under federal law, okay? Because under state law, you don't have to procure that. Federal law, you do. So a lot of that's come up. I know MML has gotten a lot of questions on that in the past 6 months or so. Just want to bring that point to your attention. And so when I mean procurement, I mean the bid laws, right? So 31713, the public bid, right? The threshold under state law, if it's between 5,000 and 50,000, you got to get 2 quotes, right? If it's over 50, you got to do the full RFP process, publicize and all that. So that's what I'm talking about when I'm mentioning procurement. So there's federal requirements as well. And so when you adopt these procedures, you just need to be aware of that. Additionally, you need to make sure that with your clerks, your city clerk's department or your finance department, that it's a clear policy as to where the money is, who's monitoring the money, who cuts the checks for the money once the board or your council approves it, and there's clear documentation of the money going out, right, for ARPA-related projects. All that's related to monitoring. If you give the money away to an eligible entity to use it for ARPA-related projects, you have to monitor that, what's called subrecipient. You're required under federal law. So you're responsible for how they spend it, because the federal government's coming back to you if they didn't spend it right. So a lot of you won't even get into that, especially now with this $10 million, up to $10 million revenue loss presumption, that you're going to be able to use that money if you make those findings on any government service, with the exceptions that Troy talked about a while ago. So again, document these procedures. When you're ready to use the money and you want to say, hey, we got $2 million from ARPA, we claim that all $2 million goes under this presumption, right, this standard allowance of revenue loss. That's fine. Put that on your minutes. And we're going to go buy a fire truck, right? Well, make sure the fire truck is properly procured under state law and under federal law, okay? And then make those findings in your resolution. And guess what? You got a brand new fire truck, which is an eligible government service under the revenue loss calculation. So again, I know it's kind of covered a broad category of things. Document, document, document. If you got questions, ask your board attorney. Maybe you've already hired a consultant. That's great. That's what they should be there, is to help you make sure that you got your policies in place and that you're making the proper findings before you spend the money. All right. That was just a brief overview on kind of that process and something to be aware of. Yes, sir. Oh, the question was, is there a website you can go to find all this? Treasury has a website. I don't know if I got it in front of me.
So the NLC and the really, you know, I hate to say this, but the counties, National Association for Counties, I go there more than I go anywhere, because they have, in fact, they did a webinar Monday, and I think it might be online now.
Yeah.
I'd go check them. NLC came out with an email about the 10 changes the other day. Y'all may have seen that. I think yesterday they came out with that. There were 10 changes to the interim rule from the final rule, that the final rule made. I would start with NLC, National Association for Counties, and in particular, anytime you see frequently asked questions, that's what you really want to look at. And then give you an idea whether you can do it or not. And if it's not in there, or even after if it is, then you go ask your lawyer, okay? Because this is federal money, and when they come to play, they come.
Yeah.
I'm telling you.
Treasury does have, though, in addition to those two websites, and there are a lot of great resources. They may dig in deeper on particular topics, National League of Cities, and then what is actually the county's called?
National Association of Counties.
Yeah, NACO. National Association of Counties. But the Treasury, U.S. Department of Treasuries has a website specifically for this money, and all of the documentation is there. All the FAQs are there. This is the overview. It's a 40-page overview. This came out Thursday of the new rule. The new rule's a lot of pages. But this is helpful. This summarizes the major changes, and just a couple pages are related to revenue loss, and that's what you should be definitely aware of, is what Troy and I are talking about. So there's a bunch of resources out there, but Treasury's a good start.
U.S. Department of Treasury webinar, it is online.
It is online
Yes,
now,
she was saying that she participated in the U.S. Department's, Treasury's Department's webinar on the update of the final rule. I listened to it yesterday for a while. There's 3 of them, one last week, yesterday, maybe today. They're posting that online, so you can go and look at it. It just summarizes the changes, or you can read this, peruse this document, which is basically what they're just reading from generally. But it's on there as well. That's a good point. Yes, for sure. Well, up to 10. I mean, whatever your dollar amount is, right? I mean, you don't. That's right. So,
otherwise,
just to be clear, that
the mayor made that decision.
That's right. Yeah.
By the clerk.
Yes. Sorry, the question was, do we need, or does your city need board or council action to declare you're taking your dollar amount, whatever you're getting, under the revenue loss calculation, right? The threshold, the presumption, up to $10 million. In other words, we're going to take what we got and we're going to claim the standard allowance that Treasury's given us. Yes, your board should make that finding, and you put it on your minutes before you spend your money.
Okay. How many new people are in here? How many new people? Okay, how does the board speak Thank you.
There you go.
You need to make sure you speak on this, board, have everything in the minutes. And I'm really talking to the city clerks and the mayor. I think it's better.
If it's not in your minutes, y'all know this, it didn't happen, right? Didn't happen. And the Supreme Court has said that recently.
All right. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Got to push the button
I have a
down. There we go.
question. Number one question, can you read the executive order from the president that was out, the executive order? Because a lot of people don't know about the executive order from the president of the United States signed. The second thing is, don't you have to have a public hearing before you do anything with your COVID money?
No to the second question. You don't have to have a public hearing on spending the money. You can. I mean, certainly, if you want to get public input, that's certainly up to your individual city. And then, first question.
That executive order, where's Cordine? I think that's the one that deals with giving the money to desperate groups. That's preferred to give the money to it.
I'll give you 1 second on the phone, I'll give you the code.
Yeah, but here's the deal. I'm pretty sure I'm right about this. Now, let me talk. So I'm pretty sure the executive order he's talking about, it allows you, or it says this ARPA money should be given to the disparate, I can't say the word, impacted groups, okay? Now, that does not mean you can divvy this money based on race, religion. It just means it's based on income. The new rule went further than the interim rule, and I think because there are a couple of court cases that said, no, you can't give it based on race. So if you give money to disparately impacted people, it has to be based on income. Right. For instance, a lot of you, the CDBG, just like CDBG, yeah. A lot of you are in qualified census tract areas, and a lot of you will just qualify. We all qualify. We're a poor state. And, but you cannot give it to groups based on their identities. You need to limit it to income, okay?
The economic impact as a result of COVID to that particular neighborhood, individual group, whatnot.
Right.
But you don't have to spend your money that way either. That you have the discretion to.
And let me say this too. So if you want to do a program, okay, if you want to do a program, guys, you have to follow state law. You can't just give money out.
Yeah.
You have to set up a grant program. You have to have a grant agreement. How those people spend the money. And you can do it, okay? I mean, you can do it under federal law, and by and large, you can do it under state law. You just have to make sure you set up a program that's a properly created program.
Like the REMP program.
Like the what?
The REMP program.
Like the REMP program. Yeah, like that. The REMP program. Yes, sir.
So the whole total of money that we got, less than 10 million, we can now use on roads.
On government
Yes.
service, that's right.
If you make the findings, you're going to take that category. That's right.
And look, if you take
repeat the
that,
question.
so the question was from the fine city of Eupora. If you take the $10 million allowance, even though you got $5 million or $200,000, you can spend that entire amount on roads. Yes.
As a government service.
Yes, that is a government service. It qualifies. Any other questions? Is the bar open?
I think you could also just let them know it's good if they're going to spread across their minutes to attach the part of the rule that they're
Yeah.
as their authority.
Here.
Yeah, or cite to it, yeah.
See, I knew it's good when you've got a president that's a lawyer too. It's good to attach when you put it in the minutes saying we're going to take the $10 million allowance under the revenue laws category to, when you put that in the minutes, attach the part of the rule that you're relying on, okay?
Make it easier for you.
Paper it up,
Yeah.
okay? Look, we appreciate what you do, and if y'all have any questions, please feel free to call and let me know if I can do anything. Thank y'all so much.
Thank you.